Hi, my name is K.Thomas, W1DED. Today I'm with Chris Plumley, the president of the Florida Contest Group, W4WF. The Florida Contest Group sponsors the Florida State QSO Party, and as you might know, they are one of four of the largest QSO parties in the country. And I believe we're only a few days away from the QSO Party. Chris, thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much, Kevin. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about the FQP in any circumstance. So I hope your viewers enjoy it.
So let's start with the date, because again, I think that it's very soon. I don't want anybody to miss it. What's the date of the QSO Party?
No. Let me check my calendar. The Florida QSO Party starts at noon Eastern, which is, if I've done the math right, 1600 Zulu on April the 27th, and we do a 10 hours on, 10 hours off, and then 10 hours on event. So it starts at noon on the 27th and goes to 10 p.m. local. And then we pick it up again the next morning at 8 o'clock Sunday morning, and we go another 10 hours. And so it ends Sunday on the East Coast of the U.S. It ends Sunday around dinner time.
So as I said, I've been told by a reliable source that the four largest state QSO parties are New England. I have to say that first because I'm from Maine. The California QSO Party, the W7 call area, and Florida. What is the history of the Florida QSO Party?
A generation ago, back in the 80s and maybe even the late 70s, there was a Florida QSO Party. It was sponsored by a now defunct magazine called Florida Skip. It coincidentally was the same weekend as our QSO Party, and it kind of fell on hard times. Florida Skip was the era when there were independent ham radio magazines being published. And as we know from, the sort of winnowing down of that era, the world of the independent ham radio magazine was not an easy one. And so Florida Skip wasn't making any money. And so they folded, and with it folded their event. In the mid 1990s, the Florida Contest Group was founded. This was totally separate from the Florida QSO Party. On trips around the state, the story goes that the founder of the Florida Contest Group, who was Jim White, K1ZX at the time, and later K4OJ, was riding around with a number of the sort of founding fathers of the FQP, and they were driving through interior Florida, which, if you've never been there, most of Florida is not Orlando and Miami and Tampa. Most of it is pretty rural. It's pretty sparsely populated. It's pretty flat. And they were driving through these interior counties, and Jim said, "Man, I bet these counties would be really popular if with county hunters, because there's just nobody here. Some of these counties have more cows than people." And they said, "We should do a contest." So the first modern Florida QSO Party started again in 1997. And we just picked a weekend that looked like it was relatively free of other conflicting contests. And it happened to be the same weekend that Florida Skip had their contest on, for many years prior. The Florida Contest Group, which had just formed, sponsored the event. We, did the usual things in the mid 90s, sent out certificates, sent out plaques, that sort of thing. The contest picked up. We had the hockey stick growth that you really dream about for a number of years. We peaked in the year of the QSO Party, which the ARRL initiated. I think that was 2016. They were really pushing QSO parties, state QSO parties, as an operating event. They had a separate event where you could earn, stars or something if you operated all of them. So that really was the peak of our domestic operation, or domestic participation. Fell off a little bit. We had another big peak in 2020 for obvious reasons. Everybody was stuck at home. It's fallen back a little bit since then, but we have, I don't have the numbers in front of me, unfortunately, but our numbers are better than pre-pandemic, not quite as good as 2020 in terms of logs submitted, which is the metric that we choose to use because that makes us number 2 behind California.
Well, first of all, tell me about the Florida Contest Group and the number of members that are part of that group.
As I said, the Florida Contest Group founded in the mid 90s. K4OJ was the founder and president. At the time, he founded the club. He said, surely we can get a dozen or so people in Florida. Florida at the time was not nearly as well populated as it is now, but it was a popular place to retire. A lot of hams who had been in the Midwest were ready to come down and enjoy warmer winters and much more pleasant weather. So there were a lot of 8s and 9s who were relocating to Florida, along with the usual 1s and 2s that we had for many years prior to that. So they said we could probably get a couple dozen people. Now today the club has somewhere around 325 members. We not too many years ago went dues optional, so we decided it was more trouble than it was worth to try to collect $5 from everybody every year. So we're happy to have everybody join. That has had the effect of sort of pumping up our number. Usually before we went dues optional, that we would grow to 325 or 330 and then fail to collect dues from 10% of those people and shrink back down to about 300. So we've been steady at just above 300 for a number of years. We're consistently submitting to the ARRL. Their metric is 50 logs per contest. We're consistently hitting that. So we're a large contest club as far as the ARRL is concerned. Our biggest contest of the year in terms of emphasis is the Florida QSO party. The second biggest is probably the ARRL 10-meter contest in December, which we're in a good spot geographically. And so we really try to turn out a lot of members for that and have a good time there. But, our members tend to tilt more towards CW. They're very, almost everybody, most of our membership are pretty enthusiastic CW operators. So they're happy to get on for sweepstakes and the CQ Worldwide, of course, and the North American QSO parties. We turn out, we have a lot of turnout for those events as well.
So why don't you talk to me about the categories for Florida operators during the QSO party? I predict that there's a fixed category, a mobile category. Are there also expedition style categories?
We do. We had an expedition group that was sort of shoehorned in as a mobile for a number of years, a group in Daytona Beach. And they kept saying, well, we're not really a mobile because we're not operating while we're moving. And we said, you're close enough. You're a mobile. They insisted for a number of years. And then we had some other folks who were interested. So we formed an expedition class. So you're right. We have fixed station, or fixed, if you get on from your home station, from somewhere in Florida, you're a fixed station. There should be plenty for you to do. We have mobiles. That's really the lifeblood of our particular event. We're in a really good spot geographically, as well as sort of the size of our counties really lends itself well to mobiles. You can do in a 10-hour stretch, you can do 20 to 24 counties without too much difficulty. So you can travel in those and hit all those counties in a good, without having to drive 180 miles an hour or anything. And then expeditions, which are, can be in multiple counties, but don't have to be. We have expeditions that we have folks come in from out of state and they rent a spot in a campground and they set up in a rare county and they operate there all weekend with a portable antenna. We consider that an expedition. We have at least one member this year, or who's for a number of years has a portable antenna mast, and he travels to 10 or 11 counties over the course of 20 hours. Of course, he has to give up some operating time to travel between sites, but the exchange is he can work everybody again in a new county. We consider that an expedition. He does very well, but this in the most recent FQP, the 2023 FQP, he finished about 5% ahead of somebody who came in from out of state and operated from a campground in one county. So, the time that he lost traveling, the single county station really made up for. So it's possible to do very well as an expedition from one county if that's your interest. And we're really reaching out this year to POTA activators in Florida. We had a webinar last night. We're really encouraging them to get on. Florida has a lot of parks. And if you hit one park on Saturday for 2 or 3 hours and go home and then go back out on Sunday afternoon to a different park in a different county and operate again, you can, first thing, you can work everybody again on the second day, which is outstanding for you. And you've just become a 2-county expedition. And, I think you'll do very well. You make a lot of QSOs and hand out a lot of POTA points, which is good for your spot on the leaderboard, and you'll do well in the contest.
So, Chris, one of the things I've noticed with other state QSO parties where you have mobile stations or crossing county lines, oftentimes rare counties are only activated for a short window. And I think in the case of the California QSO party, they give you sort of an idea of when operators might be in that county, morning, evening, Saturday, Sunday. Are you doing the same thing in Florida?
We have some really smart, much smarter than me, really smart folks who enjoy the Florida QSO party. One of those who lives outside of the state is Chuck, N05W. And he's done some pretty nifty programming to take planned activity, which we have always collected. So we can say, yes, we're sure that all 67 counties in Florida are going to be active. And so we have tentative commitments from everybody, from mobiles or fixed stations or expeditions to activate all of these counties. He was able to take that data along with some very limited time data that we have, because we ask you, which counties you're going to be on Saturday, which counties you're going to be in on Sunday, and in which order. He takes that and does some analysis and spits out a map, which I'll send you so you can maybe put it in the show notes, that says, it's a map of Florida and it's got sort of a heat map. It says, this county is going to be only activated on Sunday, or this county is only going to be activated once. It's almost worse if it's only on Saturday, because then you may not have a chance to fix it, or if you miss it, you may not have a chance to go back and get it. But we use those to make sure that there's going to be good coverage of the counties. Of course, the trick, the real truth of me saying that is we can't compel anybody to go out and operate, but we try to make an effort to take that data in. And if there's a county that's going to be very likely activated, we try to encourage, maybe somebody from a neighboring county can, maybe you can swing a little wide and pick up this second county, or, in a real pinch, we have said, we've called somebody who's going to be on from home, and we've said, look, I know that you've got a radio in your car, or you can put one in your car. What are the chances that you could go over on Sunday to this neighboring county that's not going to be activated, or that's only going to be activated briefly on Saturday, and put it on the air? And so we want to make it, the idea for us, we want to make it as enjoyable as possible for people outside the state. And we want it to be possible for a bunch of people to work all 67 counties. This past year, in 2023, we had 13 sweeps. So 13 out-of-state stations worked all 67 counties. The furthest sweep this past year was OM2 Victor Lima in Eastern Europe. He's got, of course, an enormous station, and he's a very, very good operator, but it's not exactly at a convenient time for him. It starts late Saturday afternoon and goes until early Sunday morning, and then he's got to get up again and come back at noon on Sunday and go till late Sunday night. But he sticks it out. He's in there every year, chasing the mobiles around, working these guys who are running 100 watts to small antennas from Slovakia. We had in the other direction, WJ9B, who's used to live in Indiana. He lives in Idaho now. He got a sweep as well. So we cover a pretty good footprint with activity, and it is more than possible to get a sweep from almost anywhere in the U.S., I'd say.
Chris, tell me more about the categories there in Florida. Then we'll get to people outside of Florida. But in Florida, you've mentioned the types of stations. Is there high power, low power? Is there mixed CW, phone? Tell me more about that.
The way we conceive of the categories is there's three sort of umbrella categories. You have your fixed, mobile, expedition. Within those categories, every other permutation within those categories is the same. So we have a single op. We have single op assisted. So we do still separate people who use the cluster from people who don't. We have multi-single, which is one transmitter, but any, N plus one operators, however many you like. We don't have multi-two because there's only 4 bands at play. So we thought that was a little bit of a waste to have multi-two and multi-multi. So we go straight from multi-single to multi-multi. If you have more than 2 signals on the air at a time, you're multi-multi. So that applies to all the categories. So I am going to operate in 10 days as part of a mobile multi-multi. NX4N, who's a member, lives down in South Florida. He has a large SUV, and he puts 4 antennas on the roof, and we operate 3 stations simultaneously in his SUV, driving around activating counties all weekend. You can have the same thing as an expedition. You can go to a campground and rent a couple of campsites and set up 2 stations and operate 2 stations simultaneously. You'd be a multi-multi expedition. Mobile is the only one where we have a little bit of a wrinkle. We have single op, no driver, and single op with driver. So we had some folks who said, I want to operate. I don't want to operate while I'm driving. That's distracted driving. They don't think that that's reasonable or practical. So they would really prefer to have somebody else do the driving, a spouse or a friend, or, somebody else. But it's not, they said it's not fair. I don't want to compete against somebody who has to do all the driving and operating themselves. So that's the only slight wrinkle. We do split single op mobile into driver versus no driver, but there's, the classic mobile category in FQP, and we've always had a good population of folks do this, is multi-single. You and a friend set up a mobile station in somebody's car. One of you drives and one of you operates, and then you trade partway through. So that's sort of the classic mobile category. A lot of folks do that. It's relatively routine in that way with that sort of station to do 2,000 to 2,100 Qs in 20 hours. So an average of better than 100 an hour. The best operators, our record for that category is 3,200 QSOs. So somebody averaging 160 an hour for the entire 20 hours. Of course, there's some hours where you're doing less than that, and there's a few hours where you're doing really, quite a lot more than that. So, but that's the level of activity. That's the sort of that's the expected level of activity for the contest for the mobile.
And what about mode, Chris? Is it all mixed mode, or do you have categories for phone and categories for CW?
We do. Thank you for pursuing this because I did not address it. Yes, we have single mode categories as well as mixed mode. So we don't have any digital in the Florida QSO party. It's all CW or single sideband, but you can choose to do phone only, CW only, or mixed. And all of those categories we do split out in the results. So it's possible to have a expedition, multi-single, single sideband only QRP. And that would be listed separately in the results from an expedition, multi-single, single sideband low power, for instance.
So what about points? I know in some state QSO parties, there's a differential between a CW contact and a phone contact. Is there a differential also in Florida, or are they the same?
There's a difference. That was the thinking at the time. There's a lot more casual activity on phone. If you've got a decent signal, you'll get on 20 meter sideband and you'll attract a pileup of people who just are tuning around on the radio on a Saturday and are calling anything that they can hear. So we give 1 point for single sideband QSOs, 2 points for CW QSOs. If you ask me candidly, and just between us, similar to our club's interest and our club's activity, which is tilted more towards CW, I think the scoring in the FQP tilts a little bit towards CW. There's there's quite a bit of CW activity. We get more CW only logs. Our biggest category in terms of logs submitted is single op CW only. There's a little bit more of a tilt towards CW in terms of activity, but we do these 1x1 spelling bee events or 1x1 spelling bee stations, and those stations can run just endless QSOs on sideband. So the QSOs are there. A large part of it is the activity within Florida tilts towards CW a little bit.
So, Chris, what about the people like myself outside of Florida? What are the potential plaque categories for somebody who's sitting up here in Maine?
There's no expeditions or mobiles for you guys. It all assumes a fixed station. So if you're on from Maine, you can operate single op assisted, some permutation of modes. You can do mixed mode. You can do CW only. You can do sideband only. You can do high power or low power. We do offer, or QRP, I should say, not to discount QRP. We do offer, we score everything together, and then we, in order to equalize things or come closer to equalizing the scores, we apply a power multiplier. So high power is a 1.0. Anything greater than 100 watts, we treat as high power. That gets a 1.0 multiplier. 100 watts down to 5 watts is considered low power. That gets a 2.0 multiplier. So you double we do the same score calculation of QSO points times multipliers after log checking. And then we apply this power multiplier. So 2 identical logs, 1 high power, 1 low power. The low power log is going to be 2x the final score. QRP gets a 3x multiplier. So, the same calculation, 3 identical logs, 1 QRP, 1 low power, 1 high power. The QRP log is going to win. It's going to be 3x the original score, the base score compared to 2 and 1x. So those are your categories. As far as maybe a little bit of competitive intelligence, I would say the most popular category we have outside of Florida is single op CW only, followed probably pretty closely by single op assisted CW. The highest scores are in single op mixed or single op mixed assisted because we do count multipliers by mode. So if you work 60 counties on CW and another 30 counties on single sideband, you have 90 multipliers now, and where the CW only score caps out at 67 multipliers. That's all they can work. So that's your best chance to have a high score. The sweet spot geographically, we try to hit as much of the country as we can. So for somebody in Georgia or South Carolina, they may be a little bit too close. They may feel like, these guys are on 20 meters or 15 meters all day long, and I just can't hear them. So I really only work them on 40 meters. But anywhere much north of there's a lot of activity. You should hear certainly South Florida stations you'll hear on 20 meters all day. And you'll be able to work them on the high bands as well. As far as if you're hunting for plaques, I would say single sideband only is a category that we don't have as much activity in. So, a pretty serious effort there would stand you in good stead. We do have, there's a handful of folks who are pretty active and do single sideband as a part of a mixed mode, and they'll call CQ. That's a sort of underused trick from outside of Florida. After you work the serious fixed stations, as you're chasing the mixed mode mobiles, and as they're, maybe you worked them in this county, or they're on CW and you can't hear them in this county. There's a fair amount of casual activity within Florida, people who are maybe new to contesting or they don't know what it's all about, but they're happy to answer a CQ. And as long as you're willing to wade through the non-Florida folks who are going to answer you anyway. That can be a good way to stir up unique contacts, QSOs that maybe your competition isn't making, and occasionally rare counties. You'll work somebody in an unusual county in the Panhandle that doesn't have a lot of hams in it, but you happen to be at the right place at the right time.
Chris, this has been very helpful, and I appreciate the specific information. If someone wants more information, what website would they go to?
So the Florida QSO Party website is floridaqsoparty.org. Should be pretty easy to remember. There's a wealth of information there. If you have specific questions, you can reach out. We have an open email reflector on groups.io. It's fqp@groups.io. You can join the email reflector. We're happy to have anybody. There's no membership required or anything like that. If you have questions for me, you can reach out to me directly. I'm okay on qrz.com. You can email me as well. I'm happy to. If I don't know the answer to your question, I'll happily answer it, happily find an answer and get it to you right away.
I've been talking to Chris Plumley, W4WF, the president of the Florida Contest Group. I look forward to seeing you in the Florida QSO Party the weekend of April 27th. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Kevin. Look forward to hearing you on the air and getting the main multiplier.